This story I've got for you is by Gina and it's called Ignis, and it's beautifully illustrated, these gorgeous detailed pictures of dragons by P.J. Lynch. Now this is quite a long story and probably more suitable for some of our older children than our very young ones. Ignis, written by Gina Wilson, illustrated by P.J. Lynch. Ignis lived with his sister Flamma and Grand Dragon. They had their own warm, dark cave in Dragonland, which is a secret place, no bigger than a village, hidden in rocks at the foot of a steep mountain. Ignis had fiery red scales, flaring nostrils, and a spiky tail. His wings, depending on the weather, opened like silk umbrellas or gossamer parasols. His friends all admired him very much. Some even wished they were him. Instead of themselves, he could run the fastest and fly the highest. But Ignis was sad. Every night he sat at the back of the cave, huffing and puffing, till he thought he would burst. But not a single flame ever appeared, not a flicker. Grand Dragon stirred her pot. All in good time, she said. Never worry. Come and light stars with me, said Flamma. You might just get the hang of it without thinking. But Ignis wasn't comforted. He couldn't light stars, and he couldn't start the cave fire to boil the kettle. He couldn't play Fling a Flame or All Blaze Together. He could only watch. His best friend Scintilla watched with him. She warmed him with her amber eyes. I love you anyway. I love you too, said Ignis. But it's no good unless I find my fire. I don't feel like a dragon at all. Maybe I'm really something else. One dawn, Ignis set off into the thick forest that ran all the way around the foot of the mountain. In the river, he spotted Poto floating along, with just his eyes showing. Hello, said Poto, oozily. Come on in if you like. So Ignis spent the morning slowly flowing with the current, and the afternoon caking his scales with mud. But by evening, he knew he wasn't a hippo. His mouth was much too small, and he was worried the water might rust his scales. You're a wonderful friend, he told Poto, but I'll have to be on my way. I'm not really a hippo, you know. Poto laughed. I can see that little puff of smoke. You're a dragon. But where's my fire? Said Ignis. Inside, said Poto. Best place when you're swimming. Ignis waved goodbye. I won't forget you, he called, and felt a friendly lick of flame flaring inside his chest. He gave a cough and then another, but it wouldn't come out. The next day, Ignis woke under a shady tree. Hello, said Loquax from a branch. Come on up if you like. So Ignis spent the morning flying between the sun and the treetops, and the afternoon shrieking his head off. But by evening, he knew he wasn't a parrot. He hadn't got a beak, and he wasn't tickling all over with feathers. You're a wonderful friend, he told Loquax. But I'll have to be on my way. I'm not really a parrot, you know. Loquax laughed so heartily his best tail plume dropped out. I can see that, handsome little nostril nose. You're a dragon. But where's my fire? Said Ignis. Inside, said Loquax. Best place when you're flying. When Ignis waved Loquax goodbye, the heat in his chest felt like a sore, burning place. I'll never forget you, he called, and sighed deeply, and sighed again, but still no flame came out. The next morning, Ignis woke on the very farthest side of the mountain, as far from Dragonland as he could be. Kara was sitting there on a little locked gate, swinging her legs. Am I right in thinking you're really a real dragon? You could be, said Ignis, but where's my fire? Inside with any luck, said Kara. We don't want you setting these trees alight. This gate's bolted to keep out forest monsters while I'm staying with my gran, but you can fly over it if you want to. Maybe I'm a monster, said Ignis. No, said Kara, you're lovely. So Ignis flapped over into Kara's gran's garden. They spent the morning climbing trees and making daisy chains, and the afternoon eating Kara's gran's strawberry ice cream. I've had a wonderful time, Ignis said in the evening, but I'll have to move on because even though I look like a dragon, I won't feel like one until I've found my fire. I know, said Kara, but do stay longer. We could have more wonderful times, and then you could search for your fire. So Ignis stayed with Kara for a week. They ate honey from Gran's hives and biscuits from the barrel in her larder. They lay in the shade, sucking grass stems and swapping stories about dragons and human beings. One moment it seemed as if being a human being was best, and the next being a dragon, and sometimes it seemed as if being a human being and a dragon together was the best of all. Kara said that with Ignis beside her, she wasn't frightened of monsters anymore. She unbolted the garden gate, and while Gran was dozing, she and Ignis slipped out into the forest. They hid behind tree trunks and waited. At last, when all was soundless and still, save the faintest shushing of the breezes and twittering of jewel birds, the slothly silent ones came dangling down from the branches in dappled lengths and stretches. At a tiny gasp from Kara, they jerked upwards again, out of sight. "Oh, they're frightened of me!" she exclaimed. That night, Ignis flew Kara up past the stars, higher than he'd ever been before. They paddled in bubbling moon streams. They sat on the dark shore and watched the almost invisible night gazelles stealing down to drink. Back they glided to Gran's house, Kara fast asleep on Ignis's back, his wings curved to keep her from falling. At the end of the week, they sat sadly, knowing it was time for goodbye. "We've had lots of wonderful times," sighed Kara. "I knew we would, but I'm going home tomorrow. It's school on Monday. I can't wait to tell my best friend about you." "I've got a best friend too," said Ignis, "but I'm not going home till I've found my fire." Kara kissed him for luck, she whispered. "I know you'll find it, and then you'll go home. I can always imagine you playing there with hundreds of other dragons." She skipped away. Ignis's heart felt fiery. "Remember me!" he shouted. "Of course!" Kara shouted back. "This has been my dragon summer. You only get one." Ignis sat in a heap beyond the gate. The forest looked dark and thick, and he was certain he'd never find anything else in it as good as what he'd found already. "This time, I'll climb to the top of the mountain," he thought. "I haven't looked there." He panted up the track, feeling lonely and sad without Kara. His heart was still fiery, but his gasps wouldn't turn into flames. Higher up the mountain was icy and white. "I'd just melt all this in a couple of puffs," Ignis shivered, "if I was a real dragon." He thought of Poto, the real hippo, and Loquax, the real parrot, and Kara, the real little girl, all happily playing with their friends, and he could feel a great burst of fire blazing away inside. But it wouldn't come out. He slumped down and buried his head in his wings. Then he pictured Scintilla, waiting to hear all about the forest and its inhabitants, and all about the mountain and whatever might be waiting at the top. "But I don't even know that myself," he exclaimed. Up he jumped and carried on climbing. The top of the mountain was covered with silvery powder, like the ash of Grand Dragon's cave fire. It puffed up, and glittering clouds above him. The highest peak of all shone in the sunset, orange and yellow and pink, like flame, thought Ignis. When at last he arrived, there was only a deep, dark hole. Volcano, he whispered. He poked his head over the side. The hole was black as night. It was sooty and bottomless. But its fire's gone out. He turned away. There was nothing here. All he wanted was the safe, warm cave of home. He covered his eyes and began to cry. And at that moment, the very last spark from the volcano's very last eruption 100 years ago came wandering out into the open, weak and wavering and looking for somewhere to light. With a sob and a gulp, it was sucked straight in through Ignis's open mouth. His throat filled with a hot little gurgle. He opened his eyes. An orange flicker of ribbon was streaming out in front of him. It danced around the zigzaggy rim of the crater and disappeared. Ignis cleared his throat. Just gently, nothing happened. He scraped it hard, he coughed, he sneezed. Nothing happened. And just as he was giving up again, he felt another smoky choke, and more ribbon flew out along with shiny yellow streamers and blue curls of smoke. Fire! He shouted before it could vanish. Fire, fire, fire! The more he shouted, the more fiery the ribbon became. He jumped up and down, he stood on his head, he ran in circles, the fire did the same. It's me, he gasped. The fire's coming out. He puffed and puffed. It is. Only when he was totally, absolutely certain he was right did he dare to stop puffing for a second. He flopped flat out on the mountaintop under the stars till his breath came back. Then he started again. All night long, Ignis perched on the topmost peak practicing. Then when the sun began to rise, he floated sleepily back towards Dragonland. Here comes a really real dragon, he sang, circling slowly over Gran's house where Kara might wake from her dreams and catch sight of him, and over Loquax's tree, and over Poto's river. The grey, wise elders of Dragonland were yawning and scratching their heads as Ignis glided down. There you are, you naughty, naughty dragonlet, they scolded. You could have been burned alive. The mountain's been exploding all night. Was it like this? Said Ignis, puffing out a small stream of flame. No, it wasn't. That's just a twinkly little dragon torch, scoffed the grey, wise elder. We're talking mysteries and miracles and flames that light up the world. Grand Dragon beamed from the entrance of the cave and stirred her pot at top speed. All in good time, she hummed. Never worry. Just then, Flammer and Scintilla and all Ignis's other friends came running. Ignis turned his face up to the sky and whooshed out a towering flame. Mountain fire, gasped Flammer. No, dragon fire, said Ignis. No, Ignis fire, whispered Scintilla. Ignis whooshed another blaze, sky high, then spread his wings. Come on, he said. What shall we play today? Such a beautiful book, and I love the message that that precious thing is deep down inside you, and you'll find it when you find friendship and believe in yourself. I hope you enjoyed the story.